Okay, in this session, let's compare some competing pricing strategies with value-based pricing. So one of the more popular pricing strategies that a lot of companies use is called cost-based pricing or cost-plus pricing. And basically, a cost-based or cost-plus pricing model is very simple. As the name implies, it's cost-plus pricing. So you're adding a certain amount of margin to the cost of goods sold, to how much it costs to make your product. You're adding a certain margin to that to arrive at the final price. So this is a very popular pricing strategy that a lot of companies use. So let's compare this with the value-based pricing. So cost-based pricing starts out with a product, and you build a product. So once you build a product, you understand how much it costs to make the product. So that gives you the cost information, and then based on the cost, you tack on a certain percentage of margin to arrive at your price, which then that signals how much value that your product provides to your customers. So you start out with a product going from left, and you arrive at value and customers to the right. Whereas value-based pricing, as you can see, it turns the table, and you start out with the customers. So you first try to understand how much value my product provides to my customers. All right, so that's the first thing. You have to understand how much value, here again, it's economic value that my product provides to my customers. And then based on that, you arrive at your price, based on what we just learned. And then, if you know your price information, if you know your price, that's going to determine your sales volume, and then your sales volume will influence your unit cost, how much it costs to make a product. So, in reality, it's very difficult to know how much it's going to cost to make a product without knowing your sales volume or your price information. Right? So once you know the cost information, then you develop a product based on how much you understand it's going to take to make the product. So value-based pricing goes from customers to products. Whereas cost-based pricing or cost-plus pricing starts out with a product and then arrives at the customer. So if you just compare the middle parts of these two pricing strategies, for the cost-based pricing, it's cost and then price and then value. Whereas value-based pricing, it's value, then price, then cost. So one of the key things is that it's very difficult, like I said before, it's very difficult to know the unit cost of a product without knowing the price information, because price affects sales volume, which in turn affects unit cost. So unit cost is kind of like a moving target. It's not something that's fixed and invariant. It's a moving target. And it's a moving target based on the price that's been determined. So that's why value-based cost incorporates that, because as you can see, your price comes before cost. So price determines sales volume, which in turn influences the unit cost, which then will lead to the R&D department or the new product development department making a product, understanding how much it would cost to develop the product. Another way of summarizing the difference between these two pricing strategies is that cost-plus pricing is very much a product-driven. It's an internally focused type of pricing strategy. So in order to implement or understand cost-plus pricing, you really don't need to understand much about customers because everything's internally driven. I mean, if you get the data from the accounting department, from the operations manufacturing department, you can understand how much it costs to make the product, and then you just tack on a certain margin that you want to realize, which will give you the final price. So you really don't have to deal with how much value or how much worth my product is to customers. And so the customer part is excluded from the equation. Whereas value-based pricing is very customer-driven. It's an outside-in approach. It's an externally driven approach because it all starts from understanding, how much my product is worth to the customers. That's the starting point. So these two pricing strategies take on a very different contrasting approach in terms of pricing. So some of the key characteristics of value-based pricing is that, like we just saw before, between the toy maker and the oil rig company, the same product can be charged different prices depending on different segments. So there's no rule where it says that you have to apply universal pricing to all segments, despite that you may have the same product, because as long as they provide different amounts of value and customers understand that, then you can focus on single segments at a time, charging a different price. The second point is that, again, based on our equation, you have to compare this with the next best alternative offering. So when there is no next best alternative offering, or when the next best alternative offering is very, very low, then you may have a problem here, because value-based pricing, it builds on the notion that you are charging an X amount, that value differential, compared to the next best alternative offerings price. So when that price does not exist, or the price is significantly low for some reason, then it can become a challenging task. The third is understand differentiated worth and place a dollar amount on that differentiation. So again, this goes to underscore the fact that the value that we are talking about in value-based pricing is not some type of emotional value. It is not some type of experiential value. It's not feelings. It is precisely economic value that can be quantified in monetary terms. Here we have a slide that shows you, how do companies, the difference in the degree to which companies adopt, different pricing strategies. So we already talked about value-based pricing. We talked about cost-plus pricing. And then the other one that's widely used is what we call competition-based pricing. And this is nothing other than, you price based on the competition. So you observe, what your competitors are charging, and you charge, an amount that's within their range, a ballpark figure that's, very comparable to what your competitors are charging. So as you can see here, companies use competitive-based pricing approximately 44% of the time, followed by cost-plus pricing, and then a significant, a dip at 17% for value-based pricing. So value-based pricing is not used widely, by companies, and there's, as we'll see shortly, there's good reasons for why companies may be slow to adopt or they're hesitant in implementing value-based pricing. Cost-plus pricing and competition-based pricing are very easy to understand. They're very intuitive. The data is very easy to gather, to collect. It's easy to communicate. Everyone understands it, and it's very easy to execute. Whereas, as you will see, or as you may have seen already, value-based pricing requires a lot of data, gathering. It's very challenging to communicate, to sell to different people in the organization. It's hard to convince customers why we are charging a higher price compared to the next best alternative offering. And by doing that, we need to convince them that our product provides that much more economic value than the next best alternative offering. And that requires a lot of convincing, persuading, good communication skills from the sales force to explain and convince customers that our product does provide, that much more value. Hence, we are charging that much more than the competition. And that is not always an easy task to do.